Heidi, many feel like this is sort of undermining the Me Too movement. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people are saying it doesn't even fit within the Me Too movement. I think the more interesting question, because, you know, I don't know that we're going to necessarily find middle ground where people who believe it doesn't belong start thinking it does, people who think it does start thinking it doesn't. I think the more interesting question is, how do we prevent more dates like that from happening, right? Because so many of us have been on them, men and women both. And so I think the conversation should be, how are we getting boys and girls, young men and young women, men and women of all ages, more on the same page about consent and enthusiastic consent, and sort of getting rid of some of the socialization that's happening that would lead to that kind of date, right? Where the woman feels like, okay, my first job is to be pleasing, right? And to not make this uncomfortable, any more uncomfortable than it is. And the guy thinks his job is to, you know, no matter what, be persistent and kind of talk her into the thing that he's probably been taught he needs to talk her into, right? Because we have all these messages that we raise boys and girls with, even though the dates look nothing like, you know, they used to when we came up with these messages we're raising our kids with.
Go ahead. Well, I really think that there, like you're saying, Heidi, there's this cat and mouse game that we play. And so if we reframe the way we talk about sex, and it's not just about egregious harassment, and it's more about what is great sex for both people, and what is, how do we talk about sex that's maybe not criminal but violating? Right. You know?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people. Oh, go ahead, Felicia.
I was just going to say, we wanted to check out this thought. This was an interesting sound that CNN's Ashley Banfield had to share.
If you were sexually assaulted, you should go to the police right now. If you were sexually harassed and your bad date because of his actions mitigated your ability to do your job, you should definitely speak up, and loud. Because that's happened to me too, and it stinks. But if you just had an unpleasant sexual experience, you should have gone home.
Yeah. I think it's what a lot of people felt when they read that story. And the one thing I think that is detrimental, Heidi, I think you were getting to this, is I don't think we need to choose sides on this sort of thing.
I totally agree.
I think we're learning that, obviously, I think a lot of people know this, that sexual assault, sexual harassment, it's not a black or white issue. There's so many gray areas. And the more conversations we can have in the open about these sort of experiences without being exploitative is, I think, an important thing.
Right.
I like what you said, just in terms of changing how we think about sex socially and what male and females need to do. Because when I was reading the story, I just felt like, oh, why didn't she stand up for herself? Why didn't she speak up louder? Why didn't she say no? Why didn't she leave? That was my question. But like you said, it's such a gray area. We can look at it so many different ways. However, I think having the broader conversation is what really needs to move forward, move our society forward.
I think we have to stay comfortable in the gray area for a little while on this one, and not look for clear-cut villain and clear-cut victim. I think this one really lives in the gray area, and I think we need to encourage girls to be able to say no loudly, but we also need to encourage girls to be able to say yes loudly, so that you know, their dates aren't sort of confused, like, does she mean no when she says no? Of course she means no when she says no, but I don't know that that message gets through.
Having those clear-cut lines.
Right, because the girls are thinking, well, I don't want to look like a slut, so I better make sure I don't seem like I want it, even if I do want it. All those messages need to
Definitely. Well, another story that's causing a stir online. Just this week, 13 children were found chained to beds, malnourished, tortured, and confined to their home in Southern California. So this is obviously a shocking story, but their own neighbors were shocked when they heard what was happening in their home as well. So I was thinking, have we become really disconnected from the people living right next door?
I definitely think so. And I think it's even worse in the North. I've lived in the South and I've lived in rural America. And I feel like it's even worse in larger cities for sure. Because no, I actually don't know my neighbors. Honestly, I've never seen them. So I couldn't really tell you what they look like, to be honest. I've seen one person. Okay. Hi, if you're watching, hello, man with a dog.
Neighbor.
I've seen you before.
Dogs help. Yeah, when people have pets, that helps. No, I think blacks take on distinct personalities. Do you guys feel like that? I've definitely lived in parts of the city where I wouldn't be able to pick my neighbor out of a police lineup. And then where I live now, 2 different neighbors have our house keys, like we're in and out of each other's houses all the time, but I don't know that that's the norm. I think it's very typical to live someplace for years and not even know who your neighbors are or much about them.
Right. So much has changed. I think in the Mayberry growing up, ideal that you know every single neighbor, or suburbia, you know every neighbor, walking the dog, all the kids know each other. But in the modern reality of things, we all live so much within our own lives. We have friends that are outside of just where we live. They're from college, they're from longtime friendships, and that's are the people we interact with. I think one thing is that a lesson I guess we could take from all this is to try and just speak up a little bit, ask your neighbors some questions, just to get to know who they are. And
Greet them.
So you can.
Do you go out of your way to do that?
I
Because
do,
sometimes
but
I go out of my way to not
Avoid-
talk to my neighbors.
I'm just a social guy, so I know all my neighbors and say hi to them and try and get to know them a little bit, which is not to say that's better or worse.
Right.
That's just who I am. That's just so I don't feel so awkward when we're all going in at the same time. So.